Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako. We're a weekly program on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. One of the most exciting topics to talk about here in Hawaii today is the construction of our mass transit fixed rail system. Well, do you know we're not the only ones who have fixed rail? We have this project taking place across the nation, combining federal, state, and municipal funds in major cities all over. Today we have the privilege of being able to talk with a cost engineer from the San Francisco subway system who has done something amazing recently. Her face has been plastered all over the news up there in San Francisco because she's a whistleblower. Rather than simply be a worker who goes to and from her office every day in her government position, she decided that she would make her project look a lot more interesting to the world by telling the world what's really going on. My guest today is LaVonda Atkinson, and you're going to find what she has to say absolutely amazing, especially for those of us here in Hawaii who are at the very beginning stages of our rail project. LaVonda, aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome to Ehana Kako. How do you like beautiful Hawaii?
I love it. I love the weather. I love the views. It's my first time here. Everyone's been very nice. It's beautiful.
Well, that's terrific. So you are that famous cost engineer who's blown the whistle.
Infamous, famous, one of those two.
Tell us a little bit about the project first. This is a municipal project, isn't it? And what is the scope and scale of it?
So this is the San Francisco Municipal Transit Agency project called the Central Subway Project.
All right.
This is a 2-mile extension of the T-line, which is part of the Muni transit system, which is both below ground and above ground, but a rail system.
It's called a subway. It's fixed rail, but it
Right.
does go below ground and it is above ground as well.
Correct.
And the project itself is only 2 miles.
Correct, 2 miles.
Okay, so it's really a minuscule version of what we're really trying to do here in Hawaii.
Right. At $1 billion a mile.
$1 billion a mile, there you go.
At $1 billion
We'll
a mile.
extrapolate later on in the show and try to look at some parallels. But tell me now, what is your story? You went to work, when did you start working there?
So I've been doing financial cost analysis
All right.
for about 18 years now.
And you did your graduate work at UC Berkeley?
Did my graduate work at UC Berkeley in social welfare and quantitative data analysis. I've done analysis for the state social services, for Department of Defense, for NASA, Department of Energy, Federal Transportation Agency, so all across federal agencies, because generally the funding requirements are the same. And generally, if you get more than $20 million, you are absolutely required, more than $20 million from the federal government, you are absolutely required to have a qualified earned value cost engineer on the project.
So your job was to watch the money,
Absolutely.
basically, to know
Absolutely.
All the money coming in and where it's going and give an accounting to that.
Right, and based on federal reporting requirements.
Okay, and your job then was to report what you saw.
Right.
So when did you start working?
So I started working there July 2012.
Okay.
And the project had already been going for about 2 years without a cost engineer. They had no cost engineer.
It had been going 2 years without anybody paying attention to accounting for the costs?
I mean, you know, they had people in the seat
doing
reports, but people who didn't know the rules, the regulations, the
see.
requirements, so that what was being reported, you know, really wasn't accurate. But you couldn't hold anyone accountable for it because everyone said, well, I don't really know how to do this. They just asked me to push the button and spit out the report. So they did that for a few years.
In all of San Francisco, they couldn't find anybody qualified to actually keep track of the costs.
Well, that was quite beneficial for a few years.
I see. So you think there might have been some intentionality there?
Well, you know, absolutely. Absolutely. And I will tell you, the main project manager, who is still there, his name is Eric Stasovich, one of the things he told me when he hired me was that the previous cost person, she was not a cost engineer, but told him that she was leaving because she felt like what they were doing was inappropriate and she wasn't comfortable doing that. And so there's already this awareness that some of this doesn't seem quite right.
So you walk into the picture. When do you start noticing things aren't quite kosher?
I would say my second week.
Second week?
Well,
it took you how long?
It was pretty quick. So the first thing that happened is, you know, I'm there and there's this whole flurry and they're going through all of this, you know, it's kind of this madhouse of the Three Stooges putting together this cost report. And so of course I'm supposed to learn everything in the first week. And the woman who's been doing these reports for them leaves and goes on vacation and says, you do it. Just got here, I don't even know what the heck to make of this stuff. But because they said for me to do that, well, one of the first things they explained to me is like, okay, and then when you get to this part, make sure you don't report this $1.7 million expenditure to the federal government because we weren't supposed to spend it. The San Francisco Municipal Transit used it for something not related to the project.
This was a supervisor.
Yes, this is the manager, the two managers.
Telling you, don't report this.
Right.
Isn't that tantamount to tell you, A, don't do your job, and B, don't obey the law?
Absolutely. And apparently they had been doing this for several months. And it wasn't just that one line item. There were multiple line items that they had set up a special module in the software where they can change the costs before they go into the report.
Oh, so they were doing it with great sophistication.
Yes. And so I was kind of like, well, I mean, you know, I have been doing this for a mere 18 years, but I don't think this is how
it didn't sound right, did it? So just on a human level right now, personal level, well, what was going on as you realized that you were being told to violate the law and to be part of something that was a cover-up?
Well, for one, my first thought was, I mean, I don't even have to give you that much money. If I give you $50 and I ask you to go to the store and I'm going to be out of town and I want my receipts, I want the receipts when I get back, and I don't want doctored receipts. So it's very easy. You don't have to be a professional in this industry to recognize that that's not right.
So it wasn't about rocket science.
Right.
It was about basic ethics.
Absolutely.
What's right and what's wrong.
Absolutely. So, so the first thing I did was, you know, I didn't, you know, go nuts on the whole thing. I contacted the controller's office, the whistleblower hotline, and I said to them, well, I've been here all of 2 weeks. So I can't report anything because it'll be obvious that the new kid on the block did it, right? So I said, but I do want to talk to someone and just kind of go over what's happening, and I want someone to tell me that this is okay. Can someone tell me that this is how you do business in the city of San Francisco, that this is legal and legitimate, and that someone else besides those of us erasing things and whiting it out in Excel, that someone else knows this? Then if it's well known and this is how you do business, it's a terrible way to do business, but at least I know it's honest and other people know about it.
So you wanted to determine what the standard was.
Right.
And you made use of a whistleblower hotline.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were actually not out to get anybody.
Absolutely.
You wanted to verify that what you thought wasn't right, wasn't right.
Right. Absolutely. And what I was told was to sit down, shut up, don't think. These were the explicit words from the two managers. Sit down, shut up, don't think, and write what we tell you to write. Type what we tell you to type. And I told them, I said, well, that's not what you asked for when you interviewed me. You wanted to know I know how to do my job, and I'm here to do my job. And if you tell me to go in and zero things out and hide this and delete that and don't tell anyone about X, Y, and Z, I'm not doing my job.
What are some of the irregularities that you exposed?
Oh gosh, one of the things I read about here, and I know we'll get to the similarities later, was regarding trying to trace the costs. So there's this whole complicated accounting strategy, and it does have a reason, but it is incredibly complicated. So let's say, for example, we're gonna, do a building, and we're gonna have the design phase, we're gonna have the construction phase, we're gonna have the closeout phase. So for every phase, we'll have a number that represents what phase, and then what part of the building you're in. We'll have a 3-digit number that represents that, and then such and such will have a 2-digit number. And at the end, you have a 14-digit code for every line item of the budget.
All right.
So if that's...
And just to back up, you said this is tracing the costs.
Right, to trace the costs.
Would you put that in other words for a layman?
In other words... It helps you follow the money, where it was spent, and how. So let's say we give the code 407. 407 is for doors. If you're going to buy 500 doors, then run me a report on everything with 407 in this section, and now I know how much we spent on doors and how many doors we bought, and whatever. So the codes have a reason.
So you're creating, in essence, a grand chart of accounts,
right,
so that all of the money that comes in and all of the money that comes out gets assigned to a purpose, to a label. All right. So so then you have a map in front of you. Go on.
And that's to make sure that we spend it where we said we're going to spend it, because these estimates are based on each line item. So one of the things that I noticed was they would change those numbers. And so if this item was 1.2.407, next month they'd say, okay, change that to 2.4.506 and revise the budget. Well, wait a minute. if I change that number, I am now telling the person who's reading this report that this didn't happen in phase 1, design phase. I'm saying that it happened in phase 2, in the construction phase.
It would be deliberately trying to hide an expense.
Exactly. So how would you track that cost from report to report?
You wouldn't
be able to. It's absolutely impossible. If we're not giving you the magic decoder ring, right? You know, we just got out of the Christmas Story for Christmas, and remember the little Ovaltine box, and the kid was looking forward to it, and he's waiting for the decoder. That's how this is. It's that chart of accounts so you can decode. But if you change and you change and you change, well, I've got the code, and now I know, oh, okay, this is for this phase, but you don't know that, well, last month it was in phase 1, and the previous month it was in phase 5, and the other it was in phase 6. And so it's just moving it all around.
Okay, so this chart with the changing account numbers is being made for public presentation or for reporting to the federal government in order to fulfill the reporting requirement. But somebody must be keeping a ledger somewhere else, because they need to know, how much is coming in and where it's going. Are you sure?
Absolutely not.
There's no other ledger being kept?
They don't want to know that, right? Because if you kept that separate ledger to know what the costs are really amounting to,
that'd be a smoking gun.
It'd be a smoking gun.
So,
right? So they're better off not knowing, because taxpayers are paying. They know once they, for the most part, once they get these contracts, they've got a blank check. So it doesn't really matter anymore. And they interviewed Willie Brown in San Francisco. And one of the things Willie Brown said was, well, when you see these budgets, just consider it a down payment, because none of these are really going to cost what we say. Doesn't have to be that way, but that's how it's treated. So they don't have to keep it separate.
In other words, it's being justified as being so small that it's going to wash out in the end when we actually get the full amount.
The opposite. It's being viewed as being so big in cost that it's not worthwhile to tell us the real cost up front.
I see.
Just give us a cost that we'll vote for, and we'll consider that a down payment, and just know that really it's going to cost more than that.
Okay, so
and that's,
when did you start figuring out that the taxpayers, the public, were being told that this is going to cost a lot less than we know it's going to cost, solely for the purpose of getting approval at the front end? When did you start to suspect that?
It took a few months. It took a few months because I had to go through the decoding and get things cleaned up and figured out, and it takes a few months to get up to speed.
What was an example of a cost that was underestimated at the front end, deliberately understated at the front end, but later on was going to skyrocket and give some contractors a lot of money? Can you give me an example?
I can give you a perfect example. So the main contractor who's over kind of the reporting of the financial stuff is AECOM. And again, as I said, that project manager, Eric Sosovich, works for AECOM. The AECOM line item for the first phase of the project, which would be the design phase, was a $7 million budget. When he told me to go in and revise it, he had me revise that budget to $27 million for AECOM.
From 7 million to 27?
To 27 million.
27 million.
So I'm sure he's great buddies over at AECOM, because, where they had in their books they were going to make 7 million, well, now they've made 27 million. Well, that's great. And
that's without public knowledge. That's without oversight.
Absolutely.
And then when anyone asks about it, you'll probably have changed the number of the account.
Well, see, and the interesting thing is, it was moved to that design phase in phase 1, which suggests that, this happened way back and finished in 2010 or 2012. It pretends that this is a cost that happened a long time ago. Don't worry about it now.
So it really was not at all a case of lack of competence in the reporting or rushing or a lack of resourcing. It was really a deliberate attempt to deceive the public.
Absolutely.
Well, that's incredible. We're going to take a break now, but when we come back, I'd like to hear a few more examples of how the public was deceived and how you discovered that the cost was actually far greater than people were being told. This is just a fascinating interview. We've got LaVonda Atkinson, who was the cost engineer at the San Francisco Central Subway project, talking about a process that takes place not only in San Francisco, but in cities, in state governments, in the federal government, all across the nation. And it's something that taxpayers often never get an insight into. Today we're getting an exclusive insight into what is taking place, not just in San Francisco, but I'm going to ask later on, because LaVonda has become familiar with the Hawaii situation. Is this taking place with our fixed rail system in Hawaii? I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. You're watching Ehana Kako on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Don't go away, you'll miss something. Aloha.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Aloha, Yappers, and a Happy New Year. I'm your host, King Zilli. From inner city out to the platform and now on the Yap Show. It's a new year, and most would say a new beginning. So this is a call to action. As we promote tech, energy, diversification, and globalism, with Think Tech Hawaii, the Yap Show is all about advocacy for effective leadership, comprehensive youth policies, programs, and access to knowledge and information for upward social mobility, especially for the historically underprivileged youth. This means we'll be looking at young people making a difference in their community. Youth policies here in Hawaii, the country, and the world. We want to highlight youth programs that are meeting young people where they are, working together to accomplish a goal or tackle an issue while providing information and access to free educational content for anybody looking to learn on their own time, study for an exam, or simply refresh their memory. We do this by inviting everyday people like yourself, state policymakers, youth advocacy groups, youth programs, professionals, and so forth. But most importantly, we'll be partnering up with my new organization, causeeffect.org. More information on Cause Effect, as this website is currently in development in hopes to feature courses, seminars, tutorials, and conducting surveys that will be featured on the show. As we leave behind 2014, I wish I could say we leave behind issues such as police brutality, youth violence, education, economic mobility, and so many other hot-button topics that made 2014 a difficult year. So what does it mean for the new year? What does it mean for youth policy? What does it mean for Hawaii as a whole? And most importantly, how does it affect you and your community? We want you to tune into the Yap Show at 3 p.m. Friday and find out. Aloha.
Aloha and welcome back to Ehana Kako. We're a weekly program on Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. By the way, Ehana Kako is based upon a very venerable saying here in Hawaii, E pule kako. For generations, people have said, E pule kako, let's pray together. Well, at the Grassroots Institute, we want to add to that, Ehana kako, let's work together. Can you think of the alternative, not working together? We want to unite Hawaii's people to build a better government, society, and economy. And we're just delighted to have met LaVonda Atkinson because she's doing that a little bit all on her own, but now she's gaining a great following in San Francisco, people who want to see government do what it's supposed to do and not do more than it should do. LaVonda, let's go back and start talking again about the Central Subway project. The overall cost in advance was going to be how much?
Just under $2 billion.
Under $2 billion, and we're talking about how many miles of rail?
Just under 2 miles.
Under 2 miles, so it's
Right.
$1 billion
A mile.
a mile.
Absolutely.
But after a few months, you started to discover that would be an unrealistic assessment of the cost.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think you told me in the break that it'll be at least $3 billion, possibly.
Right, it could certainly be that way. And the issue right now, so when the first bids came in, the main contract for the actual rail lines and the stations came in at $5 million higher than their highest estimate. That was the lowest estimate. So immediately when they awarded this contract in July of 2013, they were already $500 million in the hole.
So they hadn't even begun construction.
Absolutely.
And the first bids were at least $500 million more than what they told the public they would be.
Right.
So how did they handle that? Oh, by the way, we're a little bit familiar with that here in Hawaii.
Well, what they did was they wiped out all of the reserve funds
Okay.
to divert to
We
the
know
contract,
what that's like.
right? And that left where there was a requirement that they maintained, and I can't remember right off the top of my head. I think it was around $60 million
Okay.
in
A fund.
in this
their
reserve fund, so
threshold.
that basically what happens is if something overruns, you move
Sure.
that money into those line items. I kind of describe this as 14 card Monty, but really, God, it's more like a 14 by 25 Monty, because in addition to taking funds from this management reserve, which is where they're supposed to take the funds, the example I gave earlier of being told to change the AECOM line item from 7 million to 27 million, to do that properly, you take 20 million from that reserve account. Well, we didn't have $20 million in reserves, so they couldn't take it from there. So what they did was they went through multiple line items throughout the project and took a little money here and 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 a little money here to get that $27 million up in that line item. Well, do those line items below need their budgets? Well, unless they were all false, absolutely. So when all of these other lines start to overrun in the future, no one's going to know why, because they don't know where the money went. They don't know that the budget was falsely changed. They don't know that the numbering was toyed with. And so it's a huge debacle.
So money was diverted from places that it was supposed to be assigned to take care of that initial need. But you're saying in the future, those empty coffers are going to have to be filled.
Absolutely.
And we're going straight back to the public again and
Absolutely.
taking their money.
Absolutely. I mean, and they're going to have to. And going with that, those major changes, again, like I said, they didn't have proper management reserve. So I think by December of 2013, we were reporting that we had about $9 or $10 million remaining in reserves. And I provided a list to the managers of line items that the way that they decided to show that we were on budget was they created new line items of things that we had to do for the project with zero budget. So if you look at the budget and you add it all up, hey, it still adds up to $2 billion. We're on budget.
And all the line items indicate what needs to be done.
Right.
But
no budget, but there's cost.
So they're empty.
There's cost, right? So if you've got $13 million in costs on line items that have zero budget, and you have $9 million in reserve, you really have no money left. You're already at minus $4 million. And that's just with the things that I was able to untangle and figure out.
Sure.
And there's, and this project went from 2009 to the present, with these issues.
So let me ask you this question. If the money is not there in the line item accounts where it belongs, where is it?
Well, it went mostly to the contractor line items. Like I said, it went to
Contractors who were getting awarded more than we were told in the very beginning.
Technically, yes and no. So on
Okay.
one hand, you have a static contract value.
All right.
So by Eric moving that budget to 27 million, for example, he didn't increase the contract value for AECOM, but he certainly brought them a much higher profit margin in a period where they had said they'd only be making 7 million from this project and making 27 million. So that benefits them, that increases the profits for the corporation. And so it's kind of something that helps all of the people cover everything up and benefit them.
Well, let's go back to your story here. So now you're learning that there is systematic deception taking place, and you're being told to deceive the auditors, the public, the federal government,
More and
and
more.
you're starting to say, no, you're not going to do this. What began to happen in your work situation?
Oh, I was threatened.
Threatened? Well, what does that mean? You don't get to use the coffee?
That was actually a benefit. No, he like I said, he the manager Eric and then the direct manager to myself, which is Vivian Chow. She was the manager over project controls, and Eric is much higher up on the food chain. But they pull me into these meetings with just the two of them, and she'd kind of give me the angry look, and he'd stand over me and give the you better do what you told. I've let a lot of people off of this project, and I'll get rid of you too if you don't do what I tell you to do. And he had this stack, the other AECOM guy on the project. He was their quality guy. And he had a stack of people that Eric had dismissed from the project without cause pinned to his office, and to his office wall, to let me know. He said, he told me, he said, absolutely, we know that Eric is probably not doing what he's supposed to do, and we're sure he's probably telling you to just type whatever he tells you to type. And he said, and honestly, he does let people go who don't agree with him, so if you want to do your job, then do what he tells you to do. And he said, and if you want to do quality work, go work somewhere else.
Well, you must have realized that not only was there a problem in terms of the project and its proper accounting, there is now a human resource problem here at the organization.
Right.
So how did you begin to respond to that?
Well, see, this is another interesting thing on these projects, and it's very difficult to untangle because I see the problem twofold. So the way these projects are run, and this is what happened when I went to the San Francisco Comptroller's office and I talked to their lawyers and all of that, I'm not a civil servant. I don't work for the government.
All right.
And so these projects generally are not run by people for the government. They are contracted out. So this project was contracted out to AECOM, who contracted it out to Hill International, who contracted it out to Cal Christian Consulting, which is the company that I work for. And that's just my position, but there's multiple people that it's this contract to this one, to this one, to this company, to this company, to this. So there's a ton of contracting. But because they're contracted out, we are not protected by the laws of San Francisco. So it really wasn't an HR issue. It's considered more of a contractor to contractor issue. Well, all the contractors are rubbing each other's, shoulders and backs and all of that stuff. So if I go to my company, as I did, and said, hey, this is some crazy stuff going on, and I don't know if this is right, my manager came in, met with Vivian Chow and one of the other finance managers on the project, and made the point to them, because here's something else that was this I think should anger anyone who listens to this. Managing a $2 billion project, as I said, right, they had the little software module set up, which was totally inappropriate. So then the guy said, well, fine, we won't use the software anymore. We want you to do this whole project using Excel. You cannot run a project on Microsoft Excel. That's like doing this entire project in paper and pencil. You can just change. There's no audit trail or anything. And he got away with it. And they are still, to this day, for over a year now, producing these reports in Excel. And that's how he was able to say to me, hey, delete that formula, put zeros there, all these kind of things. And he made good to a certain extent on his threats.
So the accounting begins and ends with that single document on the computer system that it's on.
And only one person
but
looking
it's not
at those
part
finances.
of any system in which auditors or others could actually look into it.
Absolutely.
So there's no accountability whatsoever.
Right.
Do you think that technology was deliberate? In other words, let's get the internet out of it. Let's make it something that is so localized to this one office that's how we can maintain control over the entire process.
The software would have stopped them from doing that, because the software has auditing trails, right? And it's kind of a yes, but on the other hand, AECOM was also, well, I shouldn't say AECOM. I will say Eric Stasovich, and he did work for AECOM, had, for whatever reason, had it in for Hill International. And my understanding was Hill International, so here we have this corporate fight, Hill International was poised to be a big competitor to AECOM. So his goal, from the time I got there, he told me, was to get Hill International kicked off of that project. And he said, don't worry about it. I know you're under Hill's contract. I'll get you on another contract, but we're going to get them kicked off. So that was his whole goal. So he wanted me to go in and say that the software doesn't work. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. Blah, 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 blah. Obviously, unbeknownst to me, that he's going to use that as an excuse to push us into using Excel so he can get, more cover-ups going. So I did report the issues with the software, and there were issues with the software, but they weren't unresolvable issues. So the software really benefits. Excel obviously is not appropriate. And the taxpayers, I believe we paid about $22 million for the software that he was not allowing anyone to use. Now, the Federal Transit Agency always has an oversight committee. So the program management oversight contract. Again, another contractor. So that's still not FTA, but another contractor that looks over all of these reports. For over a year, they've been putting in these reports that there's constant changes that they can't track, and that Central Subway Project Controls needs to make the changes clear. All that time, he had been telling them, it's the software, it's the software, the software is all messed up, it's the software, so that they would agree when he says, we should just get rid of the software. So they agreed, okay, fine, there's a software problem, use Excel, but make sure you highlight to us these changes. And when I reported to the FTA Program Management Office in February of 2013, I made it clear to them that the issues that he's been telling you are with the software are not with the software. These changes are directed by Eric Stasovich, and he's falsely blaming the software so that he can continue to press why they should be using Microsoft Excel.
So there's an entire maze of different avenues by which accountability can be evaded.
Absolutely.
And in particular, this network of contractors.
Yes.
So that federal regulations in terms of oversight get dispersed, management of people and human resources, rules are out of the picture, and so forth. And here's the interesting thing. It seems that All it took was one honest individual who said, I'm going to do my job and I'm not going to be part of this deception, to cut through that labyrinth of lack of accountability.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. When did you start to realize how big the thing was that you were exposing, how significant what you were doing was?
I would say probably when they came back, they'd gone on vacation for the holidays, January 2014. He came back and immediately fired 2 schedulers. Now, we had 3 schedulers. For a project of this size, you should have 6 to 7 cost people, 6 to 7 schedulers. So we already didn't have appropriate staff.
So you were becoming suspicious of these firings. I'm going to take a quick break now, but when we come back, tell us the rest of the story.
Yeah.
And be sure to let us know what you see in common between your situation in San Francisco and what you've learned about Hawaii's rail situation here on the island of Oahu. This is Keli'i Akina, and my guest today, LaVonda Atkinson, is the cost engineer in the San Francisco Central Subway project, with just some fascinating revelations that she has just recently taken public. Don't go away, because you will be intrigued by what she has to say next. Aloha.
Okay, this is Think Tech Hawaii, and it's Wednesday. Every Wednesday is Energy Wednesday here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. every Wednesday. Come and listen to us. And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to ask Sharon to tell us more.
Come and see us every Wednesday, as Jay said. And we have people like Jim Albers from HECO here, and co-host Ray Starling here every Wednesday. We not only go on Olelo and OC16, but also stream live. So please come visit us, hear about the latest in clean energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here. You got any comment on all this?
As important as energy is in all of our lives today, this is a great forum and a great format to vet those issues. So I encourage everybody to listen in and participate.
Okay, Ray, what do you think for a close?
Well, I think this is the greatest show in the energy world here in Hawaii. You can come here every week, 1 hour, and catch the latest on what's happening and hear from the people who really know what's going on, like Jim Alberts. We appreciate your coming today.
Thank you.
Ray Starling, Sharon Moriwaki, Jim Alberts, and Jay Fidel here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. 4 to 5 p.m. Wednesday. Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. My thanks go to Jay Fidel, our producer, and all the wonderful staff and employees who put about 25 to 30 hours of live content onto the air and send it worldwide. You can get that content at www.thinktechhawaii.com. Now, back to LaVonda Atkinson, whistleblower in the San Francisco Central Subway. You were finishing up on a story when we took a break, and one day you came back to work and saw the people around you getting fired.
Right.
What did that tell you?
Well, they had told me, you know, if you don't do what we tell you to do, we can get rid of you like anyone else. Now, they couldn't technically get rid of me because I was the only cost person on the program, but he did get rid of those 2 people to make that point to me that, you know, I could still get rid of you. And even the manager, because like I said, Eric is further up the totem pole, the manager, Vivian Chow, wasn't aware he was going to let go of these 2 people. She didn't have people to replace them. And a lot of people on the project started to kind of abandon ship. The guy who was in charge of contract administration, actually, he moved here to Hawaii, his family here. And so
Is he working on our rail?
Anyway, we'll get contract administration, who knows? But
you know, what I read the San Francisco Weekly article. Mm-hmm. At what point did you decide, I'm going to go public?
I think it was when he fired those 2 people in January and threatened me and, you know, kind of warned me that I was potentially next. And I was concerned not so much about losing my job, but I was more concerned about what was going to happen on that project, you know, without anyone there to watch it, because it is in San Francisco. And I don't live in San Francisco, but this is $1 billion of federal taxpayer dollars, $600 million of state taxpayer dollars.
What you just articulated is just fascinating. You actually cared about the quality of the work and about
Absolutely.
the use of the taxpayers' money.
Absolutely.
And that was even more important than whether you kept your job.
Right, right.
Well, that's a wonderful sentiment and an important value to hold when you're working in the public service.
Absolutely.
I just wish more people had that. Well, what's the plan now? Where are you in terms of this expose?
Well, I'm writing a couple of books. First, I was going to do kind of a study of Central Subway, and I was like, I don't care that much about Central Subway all by itself. But I am writing a book called Living Inside the Whistle, And I kind of looked back over my 18 years in this industry and found that there have been several times where I kind of had to come forward on things. And I just didn't notice it, and it had never been this big before. So looking at the impacts, you know, my consulting company was worried that they wouldn't be able to get me jobs because who wants to hire an honest financial person?
How about that?
You know,
Well,
friends thought that too.
We're going to be watching very closely. Now, you've kept an eye on what's going on in Hawaii with our fixed rail project. We have common friends, for example, Panos Prevaduras and Dale Evans, who've been on this program before, have been in touch with you, and you've been keeping up. Do you see any similarities between what's going on in our project and in San Francisco's? And really, the San Francisco Central Subway is really tiny. It's 2 miles, $2 billion at the front end, compared to our project, which is much larger, about 10 times larger.
Right. About 21 miles, right?
That's right.
And 6 billion.
What have you seen?
Well, one of the articles I'd read talked about kind of this convoluted accounting and how, you know, all the different legislators and parties have been looking and trying to unravel it. And as soon as I read that, I said, yeah, absolutely, because this convoluted numerical system is necessary, and it's a required part of federal transit, and there's a good reason for it. But it's easily manipulated by dishonest people and very difficult to uncover without people on the inside or without, again, Program Management Oversight Committee. This contractor who's responsible for the oversight, that is who is supposed to be standing up. They shouldn't be submitting a report for 18 months saying, we don't know what's going on and you're doing this incorrectly. Enforce. If you're the Program Management Oversight contractor, it is their responsibility. They are empowered to come in and say, you are not doing what you've been told to do. We are here in oversight, not just to say for 18 months, oh, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. And so we really need, I mean, again, I think it still comes down to people who are going to do their job.
A full accounting by people who would not be compromised. Now, you're familiar with the entire chart of accounts for the subway system up there in San Francisco, and you say that you expect the $2 billion for that 2 miles to expand up to $3 billion. What do you think about the front-end cost that is projected for our 20-mile system of only $6 billion?
Yeah,
is that, any thoughts about that, knowing each line item that goes into the construction?
Yeah, I was really surprised by that one. And I could say my professional opinion is it is absolutely not going to be at that cost, especially when the major contracts have not been awarded for the rails and the transit stations. And that's
Are you
where
serious?
the big dollars come.
I thought it was a bargain at the front end. Are you telling me as a cost engineer that we're in for hearing that it's going to be much more than $6 billion?
Honestly, I would be surprised. I would be absolutely amazed if this project got completed in under 30 years. For under $20 billion.
$20 billion.
Absolutely.
30 years.
And I will tell you, and that's not just to be silly, the Central Subway Project was voted for by the San Francisco taxpayers in 1989 when my 25-year-old son was born. He got married last month. In December 2014, he got married. This central
his
2 mile,
children may be able to ride it.
His grandchildren will be able to ride it, right? You know, or my grandchildren, I should say. But you know, he's married. This won't finish until 2017, 2018. So now my son and his wife and child will be able to get on this 2 mile extension of the Central Subway at $1 billion a mile. You know, and like I said,
that's something.
30 years. So, you know, how long is it going to take to get this going? And then what we ran into, and I don't remember if I mentioned it earlier, I think I did, was that when we put out the contracts for the actual rail lines and the transit stations, they came in at $500 million higher. So similarly, I'm listening to $6 billion for 21 miles in Hawaii, where it's generally more expensive, you know, and I don't know how long it's going to take to do that. Like I said, it's taken us 30 years to get 2 miles.
How about that? Well, you know, I'm holding in my hand a smartphone, which represents a generational shift.
Absolutely.
Back in the days when people were thinking about fixed rail, in San Francisco, they had trolleys, they had trains, they had a whole heritage. But isn't it the case today that young people, when they're traveling, will pull out their smartphone, call for a ride share on Uber? And I read a fascinating article this morning that the Uber of the future combined with Google is going to be autonomous,
Oh.
non-driver cars,
right.
which will be like an app.
Absolutely.
You call upon them, they go anywhere you want to go and so forth. Well, what do you think that portends for this investment in San Francisco and in Hawaii in fixed rail?
And let me add to that, this ridiculous plan for the high-speed, not very high speed, but high-speed rail project that is supposed to run from San Francisco to LA. Again, it took us 30 years to do 2 miles in San Francisco. How long is it going to take us to go from LA to San Francisco? Okay, let's say we get that done in another 30 years. Google has had self-driving vehicles for years. So if you look at 5 years from now, it might be really expensive to get one of those vehicles. You look 10, 15 years from now, those may be commonplace. And then 30 to 50 years from now, we'll have high-speed rail. You know, here, however long it's going to take to build this 21 miles. At a time when we have way more options like Uber, Lyft, Sidecar, and again, autonomous self-driving vehicles coming very soon to market, it just makes no sense. And it's so expensive to create these rail lines, to purchase all of the land, to reimburse companies who say that they're going to or they have lost money in that relocation. It really doesn't make any sense in this day and age, speaking of all the technology that we have available, that we're still, you know, laying down rail and using these expensive vehicles for modes of transportation when much better opportunities are available, like bus rapid transit and things like that, that we should be re-envisioning how to provide public transit.
Well, re-envisioning, that's a good word to use here, because the vision, it seems, for San Francisco's solution and Hawaii's or Honolulu's solution is one that looks into the past.
Absolutely.
Rather than looking into the future and seeing how we can get there. But it raises the real problem for public policy. In both of our cities, we're in a difficult situation because we've raised money, made commitments, and started the building process. Almost as if we're being held hostage to keep going forward no matter what. What would you do if you were the mayor? What would you do here in Honolulu, knowing that in our first half mile we've already projected cost overruns of close to $2 billion when you look at some of them? What are your thoughts? Is it, from a public policy point of view, is it something we just have to grin our teeth and bear?
Cut the cord.
Cut the cord.
Cut the cord, absolutely.
In other words, just scrap it.
Yeah, and sometimes the reason people aren't willing to do that is because, oh, we've already spent so much.
Yeah.
But you're going to waste so much more to keep going just because you started. And stopping doesn't mean you end up with a road to nowhere that you only built this much of it or you dug blah, blah, blah. It may mean that you find a new purpose for that or you find a more efficient, cost-effective way to deliver the mass transit that people actually want and need. Because a lot of times they're delivering what the contractors want, which is the contract value, or what a legislator wants, who wants to say, you know, hey, look what I did, you know, for the public, not necessarily delivering what the public needs. And so that's really a big part of the focus is, you know, taking the honesty, the integrity, that citizenship, being just a regular person, and caring about what this really means to people as opposed to paper and dollars.
Last 20 seconds before our show ends. Talk to other potential whistleblowers, ordinary citizens. You can look right into that camera over there.
Which one? Okay. To any potential whistleblowers, I would say go for it. Have faith in your integrity. The more we speak up, the more people can feel confident that honesty will not be punished. And I also say, hit them where it counts. Get a lawyer. QUITAM, Q-U-I-T-A-M, QUITAM lawsuits are specifically where whistleblowers can file lawsuits, and unless they're losing money, I don't think they're going to start to listen.
LaVonda, thank you for what you're doing. You're an inspiration to everyone all the way across the Pacific as well.
Thank you very much.
LaVonda Atkinson has been our guest today. She's intimately acquainted with the central subway system of San Francisco, being the cost engineer, and she's got a lot of wisdom to share to other cities, particularly ours in Honolulu. This is Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, signing off from E Hana Kako on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Until next time, aloha.